LeBron's name enters the gambling storm. LeBron James was never supposed to be part of this story. But somehow, the biggest name in basketball has been pulled into one of the darkest gambling scandals the NBA has faced in years. And that is why this Malik Beasley case feels different. This is not just another headline about a player making a bad decision. This is not just another off-court controversy that disappears after a few days of social media noise. This is a federal case, a gambling investigation, and a warning sign that the NBA may be dealing with something much bigger than one man, one locker room, or one suspicious betting slip. Malik Beasley, once seen as one of the league's most dangerous shooters off the bench, is now facing allegations that could destroy everything he built. Federal prosecutors claim he was connected to a sports betting scheme involving prop bets, private information, and alleged manipulation of his own performance during the 2023-24 NBA season. And that detail is what makes the story so alarming. Because this was not about changing the final score of a game, this was allegedly about changing the numbers inside the game. A rebound here, a point total there, a stat line that looks normal to the average fan, but means everything to the people betting thousands of dollars on whether a player goes over or under. That is the nightmare scenario for the NBA. Fans can accept missed shots, they can accept bad nights, they can accept pressure, fatigue, and human mistakes. But the moment fans start wondering whether a player's stat line was real, the trust between the league and its audience begins to crack. Then LeBron's name entered the conversation, not because he was accused of wrongdoing, not because the case centered on, but because Damon Jones, a longtime friend and former teammate, was reportedly tied to a broader gambling probe involving alleged non-public information about LeBron's injury status. That one connection changed the temperature of the entire story. Suddenly, this was no longer just about Malik Beasley, it was about access. Inner circles, private information, the people around superstars. And whether the NBA's gambling problem has quietly reached places fans never imagined. So before we go deeper, tell me this. Where are you watching from right now? If you think this scandal is bigger than Malik Beasley, comment 1. If you think the NBA still has this under control, comment 2. And if you want more NBA stories like this, make sure you subscribe, because this case is only getting darker from here. Malik Beasley's federal nightmare. For Malik Beasley, the fall did not begin with a missed shot. It began with a federal indictment. That is the kind of sentence no NBA player ever expects to hear attached to his name. One day, Beasley was being talked about as a dangerous shooter, a sixth man of the year candidate, a player who had rebuilt his value with the Detroit Pistons. The next, his career was being dragged into a federal gambling case that could change the way fans look at every player prop, every strange stat line, and every suspicious performance. Federal prosecutors allege Beasley was involved in a scheme connected to sports betting, prop bets, and the manipulation of his own on-court statistics during the 2023-24 season when he was with the Milwaukee Bucks. And that detail matters, because this was not presented as a classic game-fixing scandal. This was something smaller on the scoreboard, but maybe even more dangerous to the soul of the league. The accusation was not that Beasley changed who won the game. The accusation was that he allegedly altered his own number, a rebound total, a points line, a performance that could look ordinary on a box score but extremely valuable to gamblers who knew what was coming before the public did. That is what makes this case so terrifying for the NBA. Because fans do not watch every rebound with suspicion. They do not wonder if a player intentionally stayed away from the glass. They do not look at a shooter passing up one extra attempt and immediately think, was that tied to a bet? The entire product depends on belief. Belief that the effort is real. Belief that the competition is honest. Belief that even when players fail, they fail naturally. But cases like this attack that belief. Beasley's attorney has maintained that he deserves the presumption of innocence, and legally, that is important. Allegations are not conviction. A federal charge is serious, but it is still part of a process. Still, the public damage begins long before a verdict. Sponsors pause, teams step back, fans question everything, and the player at the center of it all becomes more than an athlete. He becomes a warning sign. For Beasley, the timing could not have been worse. His basketball value was rising again. His shooting had made him useful. His reputation on the court had been repaired enough that real money was waiting. Then the investigation froze the entire picture. The NBA does not forgive gambling scandals quickly. It cannot. The league's business depends on trust. And when a player is accused of turning his own performance into a betting tool, every front office has to ask the same brutal question. Can we ever trust him on the floor again? The money trail that exposed everything. In every major scandal, there is always one thing people try to hide: the money And according to federal authorities, the money trail in Malik Beasley's case is exactly what made this story so much bigger than a rumor whispered around the league. This was not just about bad judgment. This was not just about a player around the wrong people. Prosecutors allege there were gambling losses, cash payments, debt relief, and financial pressure sitting underneath the entire situation like gasoline, waiting for a spark. That is the part that turns this from a sports story into a collapse story. Beasley was not some unknown player at his wedding 10-day contract. From the outside, it looked like he had the life that millions of young players dream about, but the outside is always the cleanest version of the story. Behind the scenes, federal prosecutors claim Beasley had gambling losses that had climbed into the millions. Not a small mistake, not one reckless weekend, million. And when that kind of pressure starts closing in, even people with fame, talent, and money can begin making decisions that feel impossible to explain later. That is where Ed Davis allegedly enters the picture in a deeper way. Davis was not just a stranger. He was not some random figure from the gambling world. He was a former NBA player, a former teammate, someone who already had a relationship with Beasley. And prosecutors allege that relationship became part of the path into the scheme. That is what makes the story colder. Because when trouble comes from outside, most players can see it coming. But when it comes through someone they know, someone they once trusted, someone who understands the locker room and the pressure of the league, the danger feels different. It does not arrive wearing a warning sign. It arrives sounding familiar. The alleged scheme was simple in theory, but devastating in reality. Beasley's statistical performance could become valuable information. If the right people knew whether he might go under or over a prop line, they could bet before the public understood what was happening. And once sportsbooks noticed unusual action around his numbers, the quiet part of the story became louder. Too much money. Too specific, too perfectly timed. That is how these things usually begin to unravel. Not with a confession, not with a dramatic scene, but with a pattern that does not make sense, a line that moves wrong, a bet that feels too informed, a player's number that suddenly becomes less like basketball and more like evidence. For Beasley, the money that may have looked like a way out allegedly became the thing that trapped him. Ed Davis and the teammate connection. The most dangerous person in a scandal is not always the stranger. Sometimes, it is someone who already knows where the door is. That is why the Ed Davis connection matters so much in the Malik Beasley case. Davis and Beasley were not random names pulled together by prosecutors. They had history. They were teammates with the Minnesota Timberwolves. They had shared locker rooms, practices, flights, losses, jokes, frustrations, and the kind of trust that only professional athletes understand. In the NBA, relationships move differently. A teammate is not just a coworker. He sees you when you are hurt. He sees you when you are struggling. He sees the pressure before the public does. He knows when your confidence is low, when your money is tight, when your family life is messy, and when the world thinks you are fine but you are really falling apart. That kind of access can be powerful. It can also be dangerous. Federal prosecutors allege Davis became a central figure in helping arrange the gambling scheme connected to Beasley's prop bets. And if those allegations are true, then this was not just a case of gamblers chasing an athlete. This was a case of someone from inside the basketball world allegedly helping turn another player's performance into a financial opportunity. That is the part that should scare the league. Because the NBA can build rules for players, it can educate rookies, it can warn teams, it can monitor betting markets. But what happens when the risk comes from former players who still have relationships with current players? What happens when the old teammate, the trusted voice, the familiar face becomes the bridge between the locker room and the betting world? That is much harder to police. According to the allegations, Davis and Beasley's connection became tied to financial pressure and betting activity. Davis allegedly had loaned money to Beasley, and that debt created a dynamic that prosecutors believe mattered. Once money enters friendship, the relationship changes. Once debt enters trust, every conversation has weight. And in a professional sports world filled with pressure, pride, and private problems, that weight can become crushing. This is why the Beasley case feels like more than one man's mistake. It shows how a player can be surrounded by people, yet still be isolated. It shows how a former teammate can understand exactly where the pressure points are. It shows how the same brotherhood that helps athletes survive the NBA can become a weakness if the wrong person uses it the wrong way. The league has always worried about outside influences, but this case raises a darker question. What if the influence is already inside the basketball family? The messages that made everything worse. In a federal case, words do not disappear just because someone thought they would. That is what makes the alleged messages in the Malik Beasley investigation so damaging. Prosecutors claim there were communications between people involved in the scheme, including conversations about moving discussions away from regular text and onto platforms where messages might be harder to preserve. And that one detail changes the feeling of the entire case, because when people are only joking, they do not usually look for cleaner ways to talk. When people are just discussing basketball, they do not usually worry about where the conversation is happening. But when someone says it is better to talk somewhere else, when money is involved, when bets are involved, when player performance is involved, the tone becomes much heavier. According to the allegations, the messages pointed toward coordination. Not confusion, not coincidence, coordination. That is what federal investigators care about. They do not need the public to understand every basketball detail. They do not need every fan to know what a rebound prop is. They look for patterns, they look for timing, they look for money movement, they look for people saying things before something happens and then profiting when it happens exactly that way. In this case, prosecutors allege there were specific games and specific statistical categories tied to the scheme. That matters because prop betting is not vague, it is precise. A player does not just play well or play badly. The market puts numbers on it. Points, rebounds, assists, threes, minutes. Every small action can become a betting event. And that is the danger. A casual fan might watch Beasley finish with fewer rebounds than expected and think nothing of it. Maybe the ball bounced the wrong way. Maybe the matchup was different. Maybe the coach changed the rotation. Basketball is full of natural randomness, but if someone had private information before the game, that randomness starts looking organized. That is why suspicious betting activity can trigger alarms. Sportsbooks do not panic because one person wins. They pay attention when the same type of money shows up in unusual ways, on unusual markets, at unusual times. When that happens, the bet stops looking like a guess and starts looking like a signal. The alleged messages are so important because they are not just about what happened on the court, they are about intent. They are about whether people knew what was supposed to happen before it happened. And in a case like this, intent is everything. Beasley's side can still fight the allegations. That is his legal right. But in the court of public opinion, the damage is already spreading. Because once fans hear that there were alleged messages, alleged private information, and alleged statistical manipulation, the box score never looks quite the same again. Damon Jones pulls LeBron into the conversation. LeBron James was not the target of the Malik Beasley case. But in the NBA, proximity can be powerful enough to create a storm. That is exactly what happened when Damon Jones became part of the broader gambling conversation. Jones was not just another former player. He was a longtime LeBron friend, a former teammate, and someone familiar to fans who followed LeBron's career across Cleveland, Miami, and Los Angeles. So when reports connected Jones to allegations involving non-public information about LeBron's injury status, the entire story shifted. Not because LeBron was accused of wrongdoing. He was not. But because the idea that someone near LeBron's world could allegedly pass along private information to people connected to gambling immediately raised the stakes. This was not about a bench player in silence anymore. This was not only about a prop bet on Malik Beasley's rebound. This now touched the orbit of the most famous basketball player of his generation, and that matters. LeBron's body is not just a medical issue. It is a business signal. If LeBron is playing, ticket prices move. TV attention rises. Betting lines shift. Opponents prepare differently. Fans tune in differently. Sportsbooks react. One piece of private injury information can be worth more than most people realize. That is why the Damon Jones allegation created so much noise. The NBA has injury reports for a reason. Teams are supposed to disclose availability in structured ways. The public should not be competing against someone who knows private information before everyone else. Once that line is crossed, the system becomes unfair before the game even begins. And for LeBron, the situation is deeply uncomfortable. He spent more than 2 decades building one of the most controlled careers in sports history. Every move calculated, every message measured, every business decision protected. Yet this investigation reached into his world through someone else's alleged choices. That is the nightmare of being a superstar. Sometimes your name can be dragged into a room you never walked into. This is also why fans reacted so strongly. When people hear LeBron and federal gambling probe in the same conversation, they do not always slow down for the details. The headline moves faster than the facts. The internet fills in blanks, theories grow, and suddenly the league has to deal with a public trust problem that goes far beyond what was actually alleged. That is the real damage. Damon Jones may be a separate thread from Beasley, but both threads point toward the same uncomfortable truth. NBA information has become valuable currency in the betting era. And when private information becomes money, everyone around the game becomes a potential risk. The fall of Malik Beasley. Before the indictment, before the federal headlines, before the NBA distance and the frozen contract talks, Malik Beasley's life had already become unstable. That is what makes his fall feel less like one sudden crash and more like a series of warning signs that kept getting louder. On the court, Beasley had value. He could shoot. He could heat up quickly. He could change a game with spacing and confidence. In Detroit, he rebuilt his image as a player who still had something to give. He played every game, hit hundreds of threes, became a fan favorite, and looked like he had earned another serious NBA payday. But off the court, the story was much messier. His name had already been in public drama. His relationship with Larsa Pippen brought attention that went far beyond basketball. Then came the public tension around his marriage to Montana Yao, the apologies, the reconciliation, the second child, and eventually another divorce filing. Every chapter added more pressure, more headlines, and more noise around a player trying to keep his career moving. For athletes, public embarrassment is not just emotional. It becomes professional. Teams notice. Fans remember. Social media never lets the story die. A player can have a great shooting night, and the comments will still bring up his personal life. That kind of noise follows you into arenas, into negotiations, into locker rooms, and into the way people talk about your future. Then came the financial picture. Federal prosecutors allege Beasley had serious gambling losses. If true, that means the pressure behind the scenes was far worse than fans ever knew. From the outside, he looked like an NBA veteran chasing another contract. Behind the scenes, he was allegedly carrying financial weight that could change the way a person thinks, reacts, and makes decisions. That does not excuse anything, but it explains the darkness around the story. Beasley was reportedly close to a major deal with the Pistons before the investigation disrupted everything. Think about that. After all the drama, after all the mistakes, after all the questions, he still had a chance to turn the page with real NBA money waiting for him. Then everything stopped. No team wanted to step into the storm. The contract disappeared. The league moved on. Beasley's career path went from NBA relevance to uncertainty, from Detroit momentum to Puerto Rico, from comeback story to cautionary tale. And that is the tragedy inside the scandal. A player who was close to rebuilding his career may have watched it collapse because of decisions tied to money, pressure, trust, and desperation. Now the question is no longer whether Malik Beasley can shoot. The question is whether the NBA will ever let him stand on that floor again. The NBA's gambling problem is bigger than one player. The NBA wants this to look like an individual problem, one player, one bad decision, one suspicious betting pattern. But the deeper the Malik Beasley case goes, the harder that becomes to believe. Because Beasley is not the only name tied to gambling controversy. The league has already seen the Jontay Porter case shake public trust. Terry Rozier, Chauncey Billups, Damon Jones, and others have also been pulled into gambling-related headlines or federal scrutiny. At some point, that stops looking like coincidence. It starts looking like a pattern. And that is what should worry the NBA most. A single player can be punished. A single case can be explained, but when multiple names across different parts of the league appear near gambling investigations, the issue becomes much bigger. It becomes about access, private information, player props, injury reports, friendships, old teammates, and the dangerous value of knowing something before the public does. The NBA entered the betting era with confidence. Legal gambling created more engagement, more partnerships, more money, and more reasons for fans to watch games they might normally ignore. A random regular season matchup suddenly mattered because someone needed Malik Beasley to grab one more rebound or hit one more three, but that same system created new risks. Now every stat can become a market, every injury update can move money, every player's minutes, role, and performance can become valuable information. And that means players, coaches, trainers, friends, family members, and former teammates can all become targets. That is the world the NBA now has to face. The league cannot act shocked. It helped normalize betting culture. It built partnerships around it. It benefited from the attention, the data, and the money. But now, when gambling scandals threaten the integrity of the sport, the NBA has to prove it can control what it helped create. Because the real danger is not just that someone broke the rules. The real danger is that fans start wondering whether the rules can even protect the game anymore. And once fans begin questioning every strange stat line, every missed rebound, and every unexpected benching, trust becomes very hard to rebuild. Adam Silver's impossible problem. Adam Silver is facing one of the hardest challenges of his time as NBA commissioner. This is not just about suspensions, it is about credibility. For years, the NBA presented itself as a modern league willing to embrace the future. It moved quickly with social media, global growth, technology, and legal sports betting. The idea was simple. Gambling already existed, so the league might as well bring it into the open, regulate it, and profit from it. At first, that looked smart, but now the consequences are showing up in federal courtrooms. The NBA is no longer dealing with harmless fan engagement. It is dealing with allegations involving players, former players, private information, prop bets, suspicious betting patterns, and serious legal cases. Every new name connected to the gambling world makes the league look more vulnerable, and that puts Silver in a difficult position. If the NBA responds too softly, fans may believe the league is protecting business interests. If it responds too harshly, players may feel they are being punished inside a system the league itself helped promote. That is the impossible balance. The league has to protect the game without pretending it had no role in building this environment. It has to punish wrongdoing, but also prevent the next scandal before it happens. That means stronger education for players, better monitoring of betting activity, clearer rules around injury information, more protection for players dealing with financial pressure, and stricter boundaries for people around athletes who may have access to private details. Because punishment after the scandal is not enough. The NBA's real mission is to protect trust before it breaks. Fans argue about missed shots, bad calls, MVP races, trades, and championships because they believe the game is real. If that belief starts to fade, the damage will not happen all at once. It will happen slowly, every time a fan watches a strange performance and wonders if there was more behind it. That is the crisis Adam Silver has to stop. Not tomorrow, right now. The lesson behind the scandal. The biggest lesson from the Malik Beasley scandal is simple. Talent can build a career, but trust is what keeps it alive. Beasley had the talent, he had the shooting, he had the NBA experience, he had a chance to rebuild his value and secure another major opportunity. But according to federal allegations, gambling pressure, financial trouble, old relationships, and dangerous choices may have pushed his career into a place where coming back will be extremely difficult. And this story is bigger than one player. It is about what happens when money becomes louder than judgment. It is about what happens when private information becomes a weapon. It is about what happens when the people around athletes understand that one injury update, one player prop, or one hidden detail can be worth thousands or even millions of dollars. The NBA has to learn from this. Players need accountability, but they also need stronger protection. Teams need to know when athletes are under serious financial pressure. Agents need to take gambling risks seriously. Veterans need to warn younger players that one secret conversation can destroy years of work, and the league must make sure that private information does not become a backdoor into illegal betting activity. LeBron James being pulled into the conversation through someone else's alleged actions shows how fragile reputations can be. Even if a superstar is not accused of wrongdoing, one person close to him can create headlines that spread faster than the truth. That should humble everyone. The league, the players, the media, the fans, and even the people betting from their phones without thinking about the pressure this new world creates. Basketball should never become a place where every missed rebound feels suspicious. It should be about competition, trust, discipline, and the love of the game. So, the message is clear. Protect the game before the money damages it. Protect the players before pressure destroys them. Protect the truth before speculation takes over. Now I want to hear from you. Comment 1 if you believe the NBA can still fix this gambling crisis. Comment 2 if you think this is only the beginning. And if this story made you think differently about the future of the league, make sure you like the video, share it with another NBA fan, and subscribe for more deep NBA stories like this.